Good afternoon. My name is Justin Schmitz. I represent the City of Lone Tree and serve as the Vice Chair of the DRCOG Transportation Advisory Committee. I call to order the July 28th, 2025 meeting right at 1:30. This is an in-person live stream meeting format. Members of the public attending by Zoom have the ability to mute and unmute themselves and share the webcam. For those attending online, please make sure that you've typed name reflects your first, last name, and who you represent. We ask those intending to speak to use the raise hand button to ask a question or comment on an agenda item. If you have any technical questions, you can direct those in the chat box and staff will reply. As a reminder to members and alternates here in person, please press the unmute button on the bottom of your mic stand. That's always the hardest part of the meeting that we have here. And make sure the light on your microphone's on, and when you're prepared to speak, and speak directly into the microphone so your voice will amplify. Please announce your name and representation when asking a question or making a comment for the record. During the business agenda, TAC members and alternates can speak or ask questions. Members of the public may speak during public comment. DRCOG is sending around a sign-up sheet. If you have not signed in, please make sure you do that. There's also copies of the agenda if you need on the table over there. With that, we will kick it off to the roll call for members, and we'll start in the inside this time. So.
Parson Priest, TDM Special Interest Seat.
Jessica Mickelbust, Colorado Department of Transportation.
Brent Soderlund, City of Littleton, Arapahoe County.
Mike Whitaker, City of Lakewood, Jefferson County.
Kelly Van Bergen, City of Arvada, Jefferson County.
Jeff Dankenbring, Arapahoe County, City of Centennial.
Art Griffith, Douglas County, Douglas County.
Chris Chauvin, City of Westminster, Adams County.
Kent Mormon, City of Thornton, Adams County.
Matt Callison, Arapahoe County, City of Aurora.
Jim Kotzer, Arapahoe County, Arapahoe County.
Jeff Boyd, Housing Special Interest.
Michelle Riccio, Adams County.
Angie Rivera, Malpieti, Equity Special Interest Seat.
Sam Kennedy, DRCOG staff.
Justin Schmidt, City of Lone Tree, City of Lone Tree.
Jacob Rieger, DRCOG, DRCOG.
Rocky McSalko, City of Wheat Ridge,
Miguel Aguilar, Town of Erie, Southwest Weld County.
Jim Houston, CDOT, Region 4.
David Kretzinger, Shadeen County of Denver, Transit.
Jonathan Webster, City and County of Denver.
Colleen Kirby Roberts, Environmental Special Interest Seat.
Chris Hudson, Town of Parker, Douglas County.
Justin Begley, City County of Denver.
Greenwald, City of Longmont, Boulder County.
Michelle Molinakis, City of Lafayette, Boulder County.
Chris Quinn with the RTD.
Dean Sampson, City of Boulder.
Carolyn Clam, DRCOG staff.
Here, Minmore, Regional Air Quality Council.
Okay, thank you. I think we got everyone in the room. Great. I'm going to pass it over to DRCOG for some membership updates.
Thank you, Chair. Several membership updates this month, a couple goodbyes and a couple hellos. We're going to start with the goodbyes, and we're going to start with the saddest goodbye. But this is Phil Greenwald's last meeting as an alternate for Boulder County. Phil's grateful again that you're here in person. Phil has been at Longmont for 25 years, just over 25 years. Before that, he was at Jefferson County, and he was also a former DRCOG employee way back when. DRCOG actually honored Phil with a Distinguished Service Award back in 2021, which was very much well-deserved. Phil has done so much for this committee, for this region, for Longmont. He is one of our sort of longstanding institutional partners. Phil, you have been a mentor to me, whether you know it or not. It is really tough to say goodbye to you, but a well-earned retirement, and we're so happy that we could say goodbye to you in person. For those who are interested, as we've said when we sent out the packet, we will have an informal gathering right after this meeting. We'll take Phil out for just a little bit, spend a little bit of time with him. So if you're interested in that, let's gather right after this meeting to do that. Phil, thank you so much. I don't know if you want to say anything, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a tribute in your last meeting.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Just for fun, I was going through my files as you do when you clean stuff out, right? And I have my June 5th, 2001 letter from DRCOG saying, we appreciate your service, but you're no longer part of the TAC because we're going to restructure it down to a very small group. So I was so happy that when you opened it up and restructured it again as we rethink these things. So thanks for inviting me back. I appreciate it.
I would like the record to reflect that whatever letter that was, it was well before the current tenure of any DRCOG employee in this room. And I can't believe Ron Papsdorf would do such a thing. I'm shocked. All right. Thank you so much, Phil. A couple other membership changes. Kelly Van Bruggen has been an alternate on this committee formerly from Adams County. We actually instituted sort of a player trade, a first-round trade from Kelly to bring her over to Jefferson County, ultimately to fill a membership seat for Jefferson County. So Kelly is now a new member from Jefferson County. So we're glad to keep you, Kelly. And then a new alternate for Jefferson County is Rocky Maxulka, sitting next to me, who is the engineering manager for the city of Wheat Ridge. So welcome, Rocky. And then taking Kelly's place in Adams County, the new alternate for Adams County. I don't think Brooke is here today, but Brooke Sabota is the new alternate for Adams County. Couple more. In our DRCOG committee guidelines, we do an annual review of TAC membership. I do that with the board chair and with our regional transportation committee. Our regional transportation committee, or RTC, also approves the special interest seats, which are on 2-year terms. So if you're a special interest seat member, when your 2-year terms are up, I come talk to you and say, do you want to keep serving? And if so, then we take that to RTC for approval. So I believe we have 11 special interest seats on TAC, but of those 11, 6 of them were up for renewal, which RTC did at their last meeting. So congratulations to Brody, Frank, Wally, Jeff, Hillary, and Carson for another 2 years. We're so glad to keep you. And then finally, for transparency, as was the case last month, while our transportation director position is open this month and last month, I am serving as DRCOG's voting alternate. So just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jacob, and DRCOG staff, and congratulations to all the special interest seats for another 2-year commitment. And maybe one more time, Phil, if you don't mind, let's do a round of applause for Phil for all the great work. I know he's like, please don't. Thank you for all your service and bringing that amazing letter today. That was exciting. All right, we're going to move on to public comment. I will now open the meeting for public comment. Please remember, public comment is limited to 3 minutes. If you've joined by Zoom, please raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button, and we will call on you to begin speaking. If you're joined by phone, please raise your virtual hand by pressing *9. We'll call on you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. Staff will unmute you. You will then need to unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your phone. We'll have 3 minutes to speak, after which time we'll ask you to wrap up and your line will be muted. As a reminder, after this public comment period, only TAC members and alternates will partake in the discussion regarding each agenda item. At this point, we will open public comment. I'll look for any public comment in the room. Not seeing any. Are there any online? All right. Well, with that, we will go ahead and close our public comment for the day, and we will move on to our meeting summary. At this time, we will move to approve the June 23rd, 2025 TAC meeting summary. This is attachment A in your packet. Is there any discussion, corrections, or questions about the June 23rd, 2025 TAC meeting? Seeing no critical items or hands raised, we will go ahead and move those as approved. Okay, we will move on to our action items today. We do have 3 action items. Our first action item is item number 4, the 2026-2027 Unified Plan Working Program. This was attachment B in your packet. And Todd Cottrell, Project and Program Delivery Manager, is going to present this item. That's a very nice photo, Todd. I like that one.
Thank you. I did not take that. All right, so we are here this afternoon to ultimately seek recommendation to the Regional Transportation Commission Committee. Our 2026-2027 Unified Planning Program, or UPWP. So what is a UPWP? That is sort of our shorthand for what we call it, but officially, again, the Unified Planning Work Program. This is a federally required document that sort of sets the priorities and the work tasks that DRCOG and its partners engage over the next 2-year period. Essentially, in layman's terms, it is the MPO's work program. It just lays out what our staff is going to be doing over that 2-year period. It's important for several reasons, and we've sort of listed those here on the slide. So compliance, DRCOG, and along with every other MPO, receives federal transportation planning funds. It outlines how those are going to be spent. It also works in terms of transparency. So what are we going to be working on so everyone in the region, including our partners, including everyone at this table, or at these tables, understands what we are going to be working on. And of course, coordination. So we have a lot of efforts that everyone is doing. Sometimes these are very intertwined, and so it just lays them out so that we can provide coordination with our partners at CDOT, RTD, and all of our local governments. The next couple slides sort of outline all of the stuff that we get to and have to go through before we actually develop the document. So sort of the pre-development portion of this plan. And we look in several ways. So we look at the federal, the state, and the local direction that is provided to us. This is looking at existing laws and anything new laws that have been adopted, state or federal regulations, directives, the planning factors that come out of the federal DOT. Each NPO gets recertified every 4 years. So we look back at the last one that was completed last year in 2024. Are there any recommendations from the federal perspective that the NPO must go through? We look at state legislation, we coordinate with CDOT and any other state agencies that are necessary, and of course receive that feedback from everyone in this room and kind of go through and determine what are the priorities and items that must be worked on over that 2-year period. That's also tied into the funding that we receive. Obviously, we don't have, millions and millions of dollars sitting around to do whatever we want. There are certain requirements. As I mentioned earlier, Federal Highway and Federal Transit provide planning funds through each federal transportation bill. And those are used primarily to fund whatever is in the UPWP, those planning activities. Over the last 15, 20 years, we have also sort of had a carryover balance, or essentially previously unused funds. And so it's going back and taking a look at those to see, okay, what is our balance and what can we apply through this 2-year period? We do have a directive from the state to sort of wind those balances down, and we are working through that process, started that process approximately 2 years ago, and will continue that for even a couple years beyond this draft UPWP. So ultimately, what does that mean in terms of the activities that we could conduct over this 2-year period? Well, in terms of funding, we do believe that our funding will be slightly lower than it's been in the last 2 years. However, we're not projecting that's going to result in a reduction in staff. We are going to be a little bit more reliant on some in-house efforts, i.e. not hiring as many consultants for some larger planning activities. And there's also the potential eventually down the line to look at incorporating other sources of funding beyond these planning funds into that mix to be able to keep our program steady and moving forward. Now we actually are getting to the activities that created this document. And this, again, this is just sort of an overview, and we'll explain this as we get later into these slides. But it's a matter of looking and going out and collecting a lot of feedback that we'll explain here in the next couple of slides. Also doing an internal review of all of those tasks that we have. When we look at the tasks within any given Unified Planning Work Program document, approximately 90% are required at some level, typically from the federal level, a little bit less so from the state perspective. So that leaves very little room every document to sort of throw in extra things or items that are sort of hot topics or the region is sort of heading towards and looking forward to. But these new ideas are incorporated within this document, and we incorporate those based on the feedback that we hear. We then are taking a look at all of these changes. Are they possible within this time frame, or should that be shifted out for the next 2 years after that? Do they meet the priorities that we heard within the feedback, and do we even have the staffing available to complete that task? All of those results, of course, are incorporated into this document. We do and did have a public review, a public comment period. Of course, we let our federal and state partners the opportunity to review this draft document. And of course, now we are here today looking ultimately for your recommendation. So going back to some of that feedback that we heard, there were some key priorities. And these essentially break down into 5 sort of buckets: air quality and resilience, housing and land use, safety, transit, and funding. This doesn't necessarily mean in any 5 of these sort of buckets, there's going to be new things added. So it also incorporates things that we might have already been doing. In terms of air quality and resilience, we are looking to finalize the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Of course, along with the Regional Transportation Plan update, there's numerous sort of elements of air quality, including the air quality conformity and the analysis on the environmental and greenhouse gas. And of course, you know, we're going to continue sort of the active transportation elements and components that we have in this document, in addition to complete streets and all of the transit planning work that we do. In terms of housing and land use, we're working to complete the regional housing strategy. And over the course of the next 2 years, we'll be providing an update to MetroVision. In terms of safety, we're looking at to update the high injury network in the regional crash profiles. We're also looking to introduce a Vision Zero operational toolkit. Looking for a couple white papers that will outline improved crash reporting. And then, of course, centered around active transportation and the gaps to essentially conduct an analysis of those gaps within the network. For transit, we will continue with our bus rapid transit planning. In addition to that, creating a new trip exchange hub. In terms of microtransit, explore sort of what a region-wide system collaboration and coordination would look like. And finally, in terms of funding, explore the creation of a regional funding initiative, just to outline what that may look like in the future. Explore cost of service analysis, and of course, with the TIP and its set-asides, we will continue to hold the calls for projects as they come up. With that, there is a proposed motion on your screen. Move to recommend to the Regional Transportation Committee the 2026-2027 Unified Planning Work Program. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Todd, very much for that presentation. Do we have any questions or comments? Yes, Angie.
Todd, thank you so much for that presentation. When I look under the air quality and resilience component, and you talk about the regional plan and active transportation, is there a reason why the term transportation demand management isn't in there?
My apologies. It should have been included.
All right, thank you.
Yep, just an oversight.
Thank you, Angie, and that was an easy response. Great. Other comments or questions? Yes, David Krunziger.
What's the typical reserves rate that DRCOG holds in a UPWP?
Oh, that is a good question. Trying to think of it in terms of percentages. Funding has fluctuated over the years, and in general, in terms of sort of our spending rate, it has roughly been $5 to $6 million per year, except for the last 4 or 5 years. That has approximately doubled as we've ramped up staff. During sort of more of those lean times, we typically were always we always had more available resources to us than what our expenses. So we had at one time our carryover balance north of, say, $10 million. Right now, we're about half of that. And by the time we get to 2028, that should be very close to zero. It sort of is just one of those things that's happened. There's been additional items that have been placed upon the MPO process. So we have intentionally ramped up staff to draw down that balance and then ultimately come to a position where we are financially stable within this program.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing that, can we bring that motion back on the board? Yes, Kent Mormon.
I move to recommend to the Regional Transportation Committee the 26-27 Unified Planning Work.
Second. That second, Chris, or? All right, thanks, Chris. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? All right. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. And do we have any abstentions on this item? All right, thank you very much. Up next will be item number 5, the Public Engagement Plan Update. This is attachment C in your packet. And Carolyn Clam, planner, will be presenting.
Sorry, I muted myself instead of unmuting myself. Okay, thank you all. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm here to talk about our 2025 Public Engagement Plan. This is an update to an existing plan, and I'll walk you guys through why we did the update, how we did the update, some plan highlights, and then we'll end with a recommended motion. So to start out with, what is the Public Engagement Plan? So these are sort of, I think of it in 2 parts. The first part is the plan is a document for the public to help inform people of DRCOG's public engagement philosophy. What are the things our agency is thinking about? What are the underlying principles whenever we do public engagement and that sort of thing. It is also a document that can help somebody get connected with the best ways to get involved, since it outlines our process. If you were curious about a particular type of project, you would find ways to get involved. And along with that comes with the item that it would also include information on DRCOG's policy process, which would be helpful information for residents, advocates, that sort of thing. The second piece of the public engagement plan is that it is a reference document for our staff. So it outlines our policies, what is required of staff when they do public engagement, you know, as the agency requires. Additionally, any legal requirements related to federal processes, what is the minimum you have to do for public engagement. Additionally, includes strategies and tips for success. Including, let's say, so include strategies and tips for success, which would be lists of ways you could potentially engage the public, how you could best engage folks depending on your project type, how you get a handle on the goals of engagement for your project, and that sort of thing. So why is DRCOG updating the plan? So our previous public engagement plan was adopted in 2019 and amended in 2021, and plenty of things have happened since then in the realm of engagement. So the big example is the COVID pandemic and moving towards online strategies and that sort of thing, wanting to include more information on that. DRCOG also has many new plans and programs with many new lessons learned and interesting engagement strategies. So we wanted to include that information in the public engagement plan as well. The update was also in the Unified Planning Work Program, so one of the things we were planning on working on anyway. And finally, DRCOG, we're always striving to make our public engagement better, so that involves going back through the existing plan, making sure everything is up to date with best practices and what we've learned as an agency. So to perform this update, we went through a couple of processes. The first thing is we looked at best practices and example public engagement plans from peer organizations and other agencies to try to see what they included, what we might be missing, any particular resources we thought were really helpful we wanted to replicate in our plan. We then worked on drafting updates over the past year and worked with our staff to review those updates, those ideas, to make sure the plan was really going to be useful for staff who were working on public engagement. So I'll go over the plan highlights next. This is from the new public engagement plan. So one of the chapters we have here is our steps for public engagement, which goes through steps 1 through 8. If you're a new employee or an existing employee or just want to do better at public engagement in a more regimented way, you can follow these steps for public engagement to make sure you don't miss anything. We also include sort of pop-out tips for success, which is that little dark gray box right there, to give people different ideas and ways to improve the process as they follow through those steps. We also have a chapter on public engagement techniques and metrics, which is more of like a brainstorming list of if you know what your goal for public engagement is, you can have a list of techniques and those metrics on how you would measure people's response to those techniques, if it was successful or not. So upon future public engagement, you could know, oh, this technique worked well, oh, this one didn't, and that sort of thing. And again, that also includes those tips for success for those little details that we really wanted staff to pay attention to. One of the other things we included was information by topic. The previous public engagement plan was pretty heavily focused on transportation planning, and DRCOG has many more many more divisions and teams that are doing all sorts of different styles of work. So we really wanted to pull out different chapters to highlight how engagement might change depending on the type of work you're doing. And lastly, that I'll be sharing with, the plan includes more than this, but this is lastly of what I'll be sharing today. One of the things we heard in those staff workshops was wanting more resources and ways of information sharing, and plenty of staff had really great ideas of like certain best practices, lists, tools out there for public engagement that didn't quite fit in the main document itself. So we pulled it out into an appendix. So if a staff member was interested in doing public engagement and wanted some additional tools, they could go to this appendix to find those tools and have them listed there. So the plan was out for public comment a few months ago, and we did make some edits when we received those public comments. So the edits we included were that we included more emphasis on working with community leaders to find participants to make sure we're getting the right people in the room. We added some suggested strategies for reaching specific communities, like disadvantaged communities, what might change in your strategy as you look into doing that. And we also added a new list of ways to use community input. So once you get community input, how do you use it? We added a list to make that more clear. So the steps that led us here, this was over the past 2 years of, well, year-ish. I guess those aren't 2 full years, but since July of last year, it's been scoping. We did that initial stakeholder, that staff outreach, then spent the time developing the document, and then had our public review. So if there are no questions, well, if there's questions, I'm happy to take them, but if there aren't any, I do have a proposed motion for you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for that update and for this project. Questions or comments? Not seeing a lot. That means good. One sort of comment maybe or question is, I think when we we do this public engagement, right, a lot of times we're trying to get new ways to engage our community, right? I know one thing we all are starting to do, right, is deliver great projects and programs and these things, right? How do we maybe find ways to celebrate those, you know, as we get out there? And then, so I think we do a lot of initial public engagement, but, you know, are there ways we can all, you know, through this and other processes, right, kind of do that victory when all of these agencies and groups are doing great things, right? And maybe through COG and others, right, how do we find a way to celebrate some of that and make those maybe engagement events? Just something we've been looking at. How do you not just get that front end, but show people what the results are of that engagement? So I know that's kind of in there, but just something as we're looking out, I'm looking to see more of, so. Other questions, comments, David?
I just wanted, David Krutzinger, Denver, just wanted to compliment the document, the full almost 70-page public involvement document. It was really well put together. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Yes, Angie.
Angie Rivera, Malpiedi, Special Equity Seat. This is a great document. Can you just talk a little bit about the population of, talking diversity is absolutely phenomenal. What about seniors, which is the largest growing population? Can you just talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So we have our list of strategies and our steps for public engagement. One of the steps specifically calls out like how to identify the people you need to talk to. Additionally, one of the appendices I did not cover is a list of potential participants. So if you are specifically looking to do outreach with older adults in the region, you could go to that list and find a couple of examples of organizations you could reach out to, for example. And then a few of our tips for success do highlight diverse needs for engagement strategies. So depending on the folks you're working with, a online option might not be the best option, or it might be because transportation is an issue, you know. So sort of like walking through those different things and then allowing the staff to use their professional judgment to, giving them the tools to allow them to use their judgment.
Carolyn, any other questions or comments? With that, Jacob?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to recognize Carolyn for her great work on this. Over the course of updating our public engagement plan, we did have a temporary vacancy in our public engagement planner position here at DRCOG until we onboarded our new engagement planner, Angie Shelburne, who also worked on this plan. But particularly in that interim, Carolyn really stepped up and just picked up the plan, shepherded it through, got it to this point in cooperation with our previous engagement planner, Kelsey, and then our current planner, Angie. So Carolyn, just wanted to say thank you, and I agree as well. It's a very great product and a very timely update, so thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Very much. And we have a motion on the board. Jeff looks excited, okay.
Can you not be excited about public engagement? Jeff Dinkenbring, City of Centennial. I move to recommend to the Regional Transportation Committee adoption of the 2025 Public Engagement Plan.
Second. Second from Art Griffith. Any discussion? All right, with that, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, signify by saying no. And any abstentions on this item? All right, thank you very much. Up next is item number 6, the corridor set-aside selection. This is attachment D in your packet, and Nora Kern, sub-area and project planning program manager, will be presenting.
All right, good afternoon. Good to see you all. My name is Nora Kern. I manage the sub-area and project planning team, and today have a selection recommendation for you for one of our set-asides. So I think most of you have seen this slide before, but this is for our corridor planning program, which is currently identified in the 2024 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program. It's focused very explicitly on advancing the priorities and the projects that are listed in the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. You can see a map of those. This is based on the current regional transportation plan, so that might shift a little bit as we update that plan. There is $3 million allocated for this program, which DRCOG is retaining and helping manage the projects that are submitted through this program. We have already allocated the first half for the 2024 to 2025 funds. So this year, we're looking to select project for the remaining $1.5 million. We had a call for letters of interest this spring, early summer. The projects had to be submitted by a local agency or a regional partner. The projects have to be identified again in the regional transportation plan. And we were focused on kind of the regional roadway system, arterial roadways, so excluding limited access roadways and trails. So after the letters of interest were submitted, we had a selection committee composed of DRCOG staff, as well as representation from CDOT Region 1, Region 4, and RTD. That kind of helped with the selection. We had these, 6 selection criteria, and so these are actually set out in the TIP policy document, which has come through this committee before. So these were what we were focused on. You can see the highest weight was given to the regional impact, readiness, and then again, alignment with the regional transportation plan. And so we had 5 projects submitted this year, which was really fantastic to see kind of the growing interest in this program. The committee felt that all 5 were really strong, so we're definitely hopeful that we can work with member governments on most, if not all of these in the coming years. But we are recommending the Spear, Leetsdale, Parker corridor study as the project for the next 2 years of funding. So that would be using all $1.5 million. I think a couple things, you can see the average scores there. One, this is a very regional project. It was submitted by Denver, but with support of CDOT, RTD, and Arapahoe County, and Aurora. It's in the next staging period, and there's a lot of work to be done. So definitely a sense of need and urgency on this corridor. And then it is a relatively unique, it's one of the only, regional diagonal corridors, connect 3, if not 4 RTD, BRT, potential future BRT corridors, as well as a light rail line. So lots of kind of key connections. But yeah, you can see the other projects here. Again, these were all really strong projects, so I think you can see that reflected in the scores. And hopefully this program will continue in the next TIP, and we can work with some of you all on some of these other projects. So we do have a recommendation today. I'm happy to take any questions, but after this committee, we are hoping to take a recommendation through our Regional Transportation Committee and the Board of Directors. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Nora, very much for that presentation and list. Any questions or comments? Okay.
Sounds good.
Pretty straightforward, I think. So we do have a recommended motion on the board there. Yes, Phil.
On my regional hat and not be bitter. So I'd move to recommend the Regional Transportation Committee the selection of the Spear, Leetsdale, Parker study for the corridor planning program in fiscal years 2026 through 2027.
We have a second. All right, we have a second by Art Griffith. Thank you very much, Phil. Appreciate that. Okay, with that, at this time, would all those in favor signify by saying aye? Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. And do we have any abstentions on this item? David Krutzinger from Denver abstains on it. Good. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nora, very much. Appreciate it. And that concludes our action items for today. But we do have one discussion item that we're going to move into. This is item number 7, the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan update. And there's the solicitation process. This was attachment E in your packet. And Jacob Rieger, Multimodal Transportation Planning Manager, will be presenting.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm presenting this on behalf of Alvin Bedell Sanchez, who actually did all the work. I just got to present it for him in his absence today, but we did want to bring this to you. It is very important. This is an informational item, so we're not looking for action today, but we did want to bring this to you. We are hoping to get sort of a informal consensus head nod on this process as we continue to go forward with updating the regional transportation plan. So for starters, just a little bit of context. Excuse me, most of you have seen this slide before, many times actually, and this just makes the point of everything that goes into developing our 2050 regional transportation plan. We really do kind of build it up from the great work that you all local governments do, our planning partners, CDOT, RTD, state things, federal requirements. There's a lot that goes into the foundation of defining ultimately what our vision and needs are for the regional transportation plan, which is a federally required step. First, we need to understand what does the region want and desire and actually need through 2050, and then we use that as a basis for actually defining what we can afford and what we can actually put into the fiscally constrained regional transportation plan. So I think Alvin covered this last month, but again, just as a little bit of reminder and context setting in terms of how project and program investment priorities are expressed in the 2050 regional transportation plan, we do that through a couple different ways. One is specific projects that we include, that we individually identify and list and map in the plan, those multimodal projects. We also have what we call projects or programs, excuse me, our category allocations. I actually call them project funding categories. The idea here is that these are financial allocations within the plan for projects that are developed when it comes tip time, but aren't specifically identified at this stage in the regional transportation plan. These tend to be smaller scale projects, right? The plan is not going to identify every single sidewalk improvement, every single maintenance activity, every single traffic operations activity that the region will do over the next 30 years. But those investments are important in the plan. And when you look at the financial plan for the fiscally constrained RTP, you know, frankly, billions of dollars into these project funding categories because these types of investments are important. So a little bit more on this. This comes from our federal requirements. At a minimum, we need to include roadway widenings, interchanges, fixed guideway, rapid transit lines. These all come from our definitions of what we call regionally significant projects for air quality conformity, since we are a non-attainment area for air quality. So we're required to identify these types of projects and list them in the plan. It does not include local roadways and changes that are not on the regional roadway system, which we have talked a lot about over the last several months here. So kind of a different way of saying this, again, the two project categories at the top are things that we are required to include. We would anyway, but we're required to include from a federal air quality conformity perspective. The project types at the bottom of this slide, or the rest of this slide, are those that we made a choice when we originally developed the first 2050 regional transportation plan 5 years ago. These are investment priorities that you all in the region said are important to us. These are important to the region. We want to identify these types of projects in the plan. So even though we're not federally required to, we have started a practice of identifying, for example, some specific safety projects in the plan, because we want to demonstrate that safety is, frankly, our top priority. And so there are safety projects in the plan, but there's also safety project funding categories allocations in the plan as well. And that's true for several of these types of projects, that they're both in the plan. It's some individual projects, but also is in our financial plan as project funding categories. So Alvin went over this last month, but it bears repeating. What gets in the plan? How do we make those decisions about what do we need to show in the plan versus what carries forward as we update the plan is more accurate to say. So as Alvin said last month, but it bears repeating, projects that will be complete this year don't need to include them. Projects that are under construction or in an active NEPA phase, or projects that have NEPA or construction funds in our transportation improvement program or in the STIP will be automatically included in the plan. We will carry them forward. You don't need to submit them. We know about them. We're carrying them forward. They will be included in the update to the 2050 RTP. Everything else, so everything on the far right, anything that is not yet in NEPA, so maybe it's a PEL study, maybe it's alternatives analysis, maybe it's a corridor planning study, maybe it's not even that yet, it's more of a concept. All of those are the types of projects and investments that we're looking for. for this upcoming candidate project solicitation. Those are the types of projects and investments that we are asking you all to submit as candidate projects or resubmit if they're already in the plan. So this slide is familiar to some of you. This is a very similar, almost identical process to what we did when we first created the 2015 Regional Transportation Plan. It looks a little bit complicated, but basically what we're saying here is, again, we start with the vision and needs at the top. We identify those priorities, and I'll talk about the solicitation process on the next few slides. You all will submit candidate projects to us. We will have an evaluation panel that evaluates those candidate projects that have been submitted. And I'll talk about how we're going to do that. And then we will also have in the middle here an interagency coordination process. This has its roots in federal law for metropolitan planning organizations, the 3C planning process, continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive. This is where the MPOs, DRCOG, CDOT, and RTD come together as the three-legged stool of that process, and we will meet frequently throughout this candidate project solicitation and evaluation process. Together, we will ultimately end up with draft investment priorities, and we will actually bring that through TAC here, through our committee process, and ultimately to the DRCOG board to adopt those final investment priorities. Now, understand, final investment priorities is one piece of the fiscally constrained plan, and I'll talk about this in subsequent slides. Sure, we'll have a list of projects, and we'll figure out which of those are fiscally constrained, but there's more that goes into developing the fiscally constrained plan, and I'll show you that. So this just says this a little bit different words, a little bit different graphics, but two types of priorities that we're looking for here, but the same process for evaluation. We're going to go through the same process. There is not a dual track here, but we do want to identify interagency priorities. Again, those come from the three-legged stool agencies, DRCOG, CDOT, RTD. Our agencies ourselves will submit our priorities as part of this process. Obviously, we're focused on sort of the big major regional, interstate, U.S., Colorado State Highway, rapid transit projects. We will in part identify those priorities. You can as well, but we will do that through our regional agencies. And then the sub-regional priorities refer to the work that we're going to ask you to do through your county sub-regional transportation forums. We're going to ask each of you at the county forum level, your jurisdictions, to get together within your forum and identify those candidate projects, those priorities for your county forum that as a forum you will submit to us. So you will come together. This will not be individual municipalities or jurisdictions doing this. You will work cooperatively through your forum, and the Jefferson County Forum and the Arapahoe County Forum and the Boulder County Forum will submit your priorities for your geographic areas. Alvin showed you this last month. This is the number of candidate project submittals for each of the county-based sub-regional transportation forums. Again, this is an average of population, employment, and vehicle miles traveled. This is just a sort of a fair way. We borrowed this from the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. This is just kind of a fair, objective way to come up with the number of project submittals by forum. So if DRCOG, CDOT, RTD submits something that's in your county, in your jurisdiction, that does not count against your number. These are the projects that you all as county sub-regional forums would come up with and submit to us as candidate projects. So again, Alvin talked about this last month, but in terms now of talking about evaluation, really rooted in our regional transportation plan priorities. You all have seen this slide before, the 6 priorities that we have articulated as important in the regional transportation plan. And I'll show you how this sort of blends into evaluation criteria. We're really going to use 3 things to evaluate candidate projects. One is these priorities. The second is our MetroVision plan and some of the objectives and the architecture within our MetroVision plan. And you can see some of this here as Alvin has articulated how we're going to do that. We're going to pull some of those objectives, some of those measures from MetroVision. This will be largely qualitative. We're not doing TIP applications here. So let me reassure you, this is not going to be a 10-page application, but we do want folks to speak about candidate projects, how they meet MetroVision, how they address some of these criteria within MetroVision. And that could be a yes, no, could be a high, medium, low. So this is generally qualitative, but we do want to create that link between our MetroVision plan and these candidate project submittals. The other thing that we're going to do, so here's an example by RTP theme. Again, a series of questions, high, medium, low. Again, borrowing from the priorities themselves in the RTP, borrowing from MetroVision language as a way that you can speak to each of these priorities in terms of evaluation criteria. Here's an example for freight and active transportation. The third layer, so I said there will be three things: the RTP priorities, our MetroVision plan, and then the TPM here is the transportation performance measures. These are the federal performance measures that all MPOs and state DOTs, including CDOT, across the country are subject to. It is a federal requirement that we use these transportation performance measures in the evaluation of investments that ultimately find their way into the fiscally constrained RTP. So we've kind of blended this into the evaluation criteria. When we have these national measures, these transportation performance measures that lend themselves to these particular topics, we weave them into that topic or that priority as part of the evaluation criteria. So again, just to show you the rest of it, safety, air quality, and regional transit. Again, both the priorities themselves from the RTP, language from MetroVision, and where suitable, where appropriate, the national transportation performance measures that we borrow from as well. So this will be a point scale. DRCOG staff will evaluate these candidate project submittal. Well, no, sorry. Let me say that more precisely. DRCOG staff will score, not evaluate, but score the candidate project submittals against the evaluation criteria that I've shown you. And this just shows kind of the score point breakdown, 8 points for the MetroVision objectives, and then the points per each of the 6 RTP priorities that, again, also weave in the national performance measures. So you can see that point breakdown, ultimately a max of 48 points per project. And no project is going to get 48 points, right? But this is just how that point scoring breakdown would occur. So in terms of the process of evaluating, and that's where I want to be very clear, DRCOG staff will score the candidate project submittals. We will convene a regional review panel made up of DRCOG, CDOT, RTD staff, and representatives that we will ask each of the county sub-regional transportation forums. We will ask you to appoint someone so that the evaluation panel will be representative geographically and otherwise of our entire region. This will form our regional review panel. We expect this panel to meet approximately mid-October, probably a couple meetings to work through all of the information regarding the candidate projects. So again, those investment priorities evaluated against the RTP priorities, either, as I said, a yes, no, or a high, medium, low, and MetroVision and the federal performance measures. And then we will combine that with the draft financial plan and coordination between the partner agencies to determine the draft program and project investment priorities. So again, understand it's not just a list, as important as that is, of candidate projects that we're evaluating and scoring, but it's also about staging periods. It's also about the financial plan. It's also about the project funding categories. It's also about balancing for fiscal constraint. There's a lot that goes into creating the actual fiscal constraint plan and the financial plan, of which this process will help us get there. So some details on the process itself. We anticipate a call for projects approximately late August through October. We got some feedback from you that you wanted a long lead time in this. You wanted time to go to your city councils, your county commissions. You wanted time to socialize some of these projects, to work together as a forum, probably in multiple forum meetings. So we wanted to give you several weeks to do this. So we'll have these due approximately October 10th. We will use FormStack as the sort of online kind of, software application to submit this. Again, it's not going to be onerous. It's not a TIP application. You've seen basically the guts of what we're going to ask about. Additional documentation is applicable. GIS shape files we'll ask for as applicable. And then to be clear, in terms of agencies, only public sector agencies, municipalities, county governments, CDOT and RTD, can submit for projects to be included in the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. So we are not talking about nonprofits. We're not talking about private sector folks. This is a public sector exercise, right? Because you all are the project sponsors of these projects and investments. Only RTD can submit Fast Tracks Rapid Transit projects related to the voter-approved Fast Tracks program. So if someone wants to submit an extension of a rail line out to somewhere that's not in Fast Tracks, that's different. But if it relates to the voter-approved Fast Tracks program, that needs to come from RTD. And then similarly, only private toll companies or toll highway authorities can submit toll road, not managed lane, but toll road projects Toll road projects need to come from a toll highway authority, is basically what that's saying, of which we have 3, E-470, Northwest Parkway, and Jefferson Parkway. So again, the information requested, I'm not going to go through this individually, you can see it, but obviously we need to know the basics about the project sponsor, where it is, what is the project, what's the scope. We asked about the cost, and we ask about the estimated year of completion because that will help us for staging within our staging periods in the plan. Remember that we have staging periods, air quality and financial staging periods, 5 and 10-year periods over the course of from now through 2050 in the plan. And then obviously we want some justification and rationale and explanation in response to the criteria that I've identified for you. Why is this project important? How does it relate to MetroVision? How will it help speak to regional or address regional priorities are the kinds of things that we'll be looking for. And then timeline on this, as I said, call for projects kind of August through October. During that time, the interagency, 3-agency process, we will also be meeting. Then we'll convene the evaluation panel in October to work through that list of candidate project submittals that were received. And again, through the review panel that I talked about and the interagency process, and leading up to action by this committee on our investment priorities, which we're penciling in as December, and then taking it to our Regional Transportation Committee and our board very early next year to adopt the fiscally constrained investment priorities, because once that's fixed, that will help us then set the baseline and the foundation for preparing the rest of the fiscally constrained plan. So that was a lot of information, but I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, very much. First hand I saw was Kent, then we have Jessica.
Thank you for that presentation, Kent Mormon, Adams County, City of Thornton. On your identifying priority slide, I just needed a little clarification and then a follow-up to that. Where you're talking about greatest needs for the region will be identified by DRCOG, CDOT, and RTD. In the past, the sub-regional councils have also provided regional projects. Is that excluding us from providing regional projects, or is this just that they're not determined what they want and then we can still submit regional projects? Because that seems I just want a clarification there.
Yeah, Ken, thank you. That's a good question. So let me clarify. I would characterize this as areas of focus, right? So you can expect that the 3 regional state agencies would focus on, again, kind of those rapid transit, state highway, some of those big picture projects. Primarily, you all at the county and municipal level should focus on your system, your roadways, your local needs, right? One doesn't preclude the other, and as you noted, Ken, in the past, and we anticipate this time as well, that you could potentially submit, for example, Arapahoe County could submit, or Adams County could submit something on a state highway. Maybe CDOT will already do that, and so we want some coordination in these dual tracks, kind of as we're identifying projects in between. I don't think it precludes the locals from thinking about or submitting something on a state highway, but it is to say that first and foremost, focus on your jurisdictions, your roadway network, while the agencies focus on the big picture network, but we do expect some cross-pollination. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And then the second question is this projects that are only going to be the federal funds or local, or is it projects that will only receive local funds? In other words, as we look at these investments, the locally funded projects, are you mainly looking at regional, federally and state funded projects, or are locally funded projects also listed?
Yeah.
Submittal time.
Yeah, thank you. No, very, very good clarification. And I actually meant to say this here, so thank you for reminding me as a way to answer your question. Yes, we are looking at regionally funded projects in this candidate solicitation process, and we will make that clear when we send it out. We are talking about competing for regional, what we call regional funds within the regional transportation plan. However, as Kent is alluding to, if you have a locally funded project that's currently in the 2050 RTP as a locally funded project, you as a forum, let's say, could theoretically submit that project for regional funding as a candidate for regional funding. Again, doesn't mean it will make it in the fiscally constrained plan regionally funded, but it would be eligible for submittal. One of the steps that we'll need to do is Once that process goes through, locally funded projects that were submitted as part of this process for regional funds, those that obviously maybe, do make the cut and make it into the fiscally constrained plan, regionally funded is one path. Those that don't, then we'll need to come back to project sponsors, to you all, and kind of talk about kind of the locally funded projects. So yes, this solicitation is for regional funding, but locally funded projects are eligible.
Thank you. Kent, Jessica?
Thanks, great presentation. It's always a lot of work to pull plans like this together. I just have a couple questions on scoring. So on slide 11, on improved pavement and or bridge condition, the scoring is a high, medium, and low. I guess my question, I have a couple questions. Some of the other scoring are yes and no. So what makes some of them high, medium, low, and some yes and no? And then is the scoring always equal? Like if it's a high, medium, low, is high always 4 points, medium is always 3 points, low is 1 point, or can the panel go, well, it's kind of a high medium, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm just wondering, okay.
Yeah. So let me try and tackle your first question first. Why are some things yes, no? Why are some things high, medium, and low? I think based on our experience doing this last time, we recognize that not all of these are equally situated in terms of someone's ability to respond to them. Some things are just, well, you do it or you don't, right? Some projects can address something or it can't. Some things are degrees of sort of addressing or degrees of ability to address. And so, yes, a little bit of judgment here, Jessica and everyone, but I think we're trying to, where we think we can or where we think you can, frankly, sort of speak to the degree of something that we're trying to honor that with a high, medium, low, where it seems a little more cut and dried, it either does it or it doesn't, those are the yes, nos. Now, in terms of scoring, I believe if I understood your question correctly, that the scoring, the actual scoring, and let me come to that slide here, it will not change in the sense that we will show the scoring rubric, but it will be what it is. And again, we're just doing a straight scoring. The panel is going to take that scoring information as well as other information we provide to the project review panel and use that as a basis for helping to determine ultimately the projects that go in the fiscally constrained plan. What we are not going to do is say, Jessica's project got a 4.67 and Kent's project got a 4.25, so Jessica's project made it and Kent's didn't. That's not what we're doing exactly. But yes, we do want to score the project. Hopefully these will naturally land in a little bit of some groupings. There will be some other information we provide, particularly, for example, just to choose one thing, and we made reference to it on one of the slides here, is we will pull some congestion data from our model. That is also a federal requirement to look at our congestion management program and to pull some of that information. So not just scoring, although primarily scoring that we'll make available to the panel to help the panel sort of sort through those projects. Does that answer your two questions?
I think so, yeah. And then just one more, just kind of note for the pavement and bridge conditions. CDOT has spent a lot of time kind of pulling together, at least in Region 1, we have a bridge prioritization list of fair, good, poor bridges, and we've also got some really good tools for our worst first for pavement conditions. So if there's any way to reference those, we're not sure, on the panel what tools they'll have to kind of determine, is this, are we improving this bridge, high, medium, low? But we have some tools that could maybe help kind of guide those decisions.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk offline, but that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very much. Yes, Colleen.
Hi, Colleen Kirby-Roberts, Environmental Special Interest Seat. I had two follow-up questions on that. How are you incorporating these evaluation criteria on the slide here into the other 6 boxes that add up to the 48 points, since this is a separate set of criteria?
Yeah, so let me come to that slide. So there are some things specifically relating to MetroVision criteria. And again, it's, once you see it in the application, the scoring rubric, it'll probably be a little more clear. But the point here is that there are some things related specifically to MetroVision objectives that are 8 points, and those kind of stand alone, like just how does it address these MetroVision objectives. There's other things within MetroVision, and that's what some of this is, along with national performance measures that help sort of draw out these 6 RTP priorities. Those are included within these green boxes in terms of the scoring for each of those RTP priorities.
Thanks. I just read your box a little bit wrong, so thanks for explaining that.
Oh, no worries.
Yes, Justin.
Thanks, Jacob. Odd side question to this. What do you think the latest date by which you'd be set to have a regional review panel member identified? We just have a bunch of forum business kind of piling up and prefer to consolidate a lot of those actions to one meeting. And if I knew when you wanted that by, I think I could.
Yeah. So based on Alvin's draft schedule, these candidate project submittals would be due by October 10th. So not very long after, kind of mid to late October, we would convene the review panel. So I'd say probably by the beginning of October at the latest. That gives you a little bit of time.
Jessica?
Thanks. One more question. Jessica Mickelbust with CDOT. On, I don't know what slide, the one with the map sub-regional candidate project submittals, I'm just curious. So if somebody doesn't use all of their submittal options, like if the county has 5 and they only turn in 3, do those other 2 submittal opportunities like get tossed up for grabs, or do they just fall off the table, or how does that work?
Yeah, first of all, I don't think we'll have that problem, but if we do, no, they're not, there's no fair way to allocate them, right? If one county doesn't use a couple, there's no way to, you know, I'm not gonna take food bribes. So they would probably just fall off, honestly. But the other point that I should make here, so thank you for raising that issue, is that this has happened before. Forums can coordinate. We would like to see, so let me say it this way. I'll use State Highway 7 as an example. Last time we did this 5 years ago, I think we got at least 3 project submittals for State Highway 7. We recognize that duplication, but we're actually asking for that in a sense because just, you know, these multi-jurisdictional corridors, we want to hear from each of the constituent county forums about those projects. Now, one of the things that the review panel will do and that the interagency process will do is that if we have a couple projects that seem like they could fit together, or maybe there's a way to kind of glom them together, you know, we might do that as a way of sort of creating, you know, a bigger project or one less project, frankly, or something that helps kind of move it along. But at this stage of the process, we just want to hear about those sort of constituent pieces. So yes, forums can work together, but if there is a cross-jurisdictional corridor, frankly, I think we'd like to hear from each of the forums because we want to understand how that project lands in each of the geographic counties. But Jessica, you didn't quite ask me that question, but I thought that was important to add on to what you were getting at.
That was a good clarification. I was hoping we could trade like a 2050 for 2 2055 projects, right? We could make like a...
Now, look, I'll be honest. I do love chocolate chip cookies. I love ice creams. Right? I love all kinds of snacks, but that's not how we're doing this.
Good to clarify.
Yeah.
Kent Mormon, that's a real question.
As you develop these and we move forward and we combine these projects or something, are you looking at what will be constructed or the next steps to happen? You know, obviously after 2050, maybe there's one planning period that we would want to do design in NEPA, and it might fall into the second one to actually construct it or something. So are you wanting the full project submitted and then break it down later? Just asking the question on project.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the short answer is we just want the project. Remember, the RTP is a 25, 30-year document, right? So we're looking out to 2015. It's not the tip, exactly. And so we're not looking quite at that fine grain of detail, but we do want to understand for a particular project, if you have that kind of information, it would be helpful to have it. If you know that a project's about to go into a PEL or something, and particularly when we ask about, let me get to that slide, when we ask about, you know, we'll ask about the description of the project. We'll ask about year of completion. So those details are helpful. We do want to know them. If it kind of helps putting together sort of what stage the project should go in, or is it worth showing a project in 2 different stages? I'll give one example from CDOT, US 285. We have multiple projects in the plan because 285 in the mountain area of Jefferson County, we have some roadway widenings, we have some interchange improvements. You know, they're all kind of tied together geographically, but they are distinct projects. So we actually do show them separately in the plan. So I think what I'd say, Kent and everyone, is, you know, yes, we're looking at the project conceptually, but if you have those details, share them because that will only ultimately help us.
SR Griffith.
You briefly talked about federal performance measures. Just so I understand, could you just go over those specifically, kind of maybe merge them in? clarity there. And I have one more question after.
Yeah, here's some of them here. So again, the TPM is the Transportation Performance Measures. That's the Federal Highway Administration term for them, but there are several that relate to safety, as Jessica noted, that relate to bridge condition and maintenance and level of truck travel time reliability and air quality. Like there's a whole bunch. And so what we've done, because it is a federal requirement that we use those in the construction of the fiscally constrained plan, again, we've noted them here where we've been able to weave them in, that they become part of the criteria for each of the priorities. And so they ultimately get woven into the green boxes. Does that answer your question, Art?
Yeah, I think so. Like Colleen's question, I was kind of like, okay, so the bridge might get some freight and safety, but the rest it doesn't score anything.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We know that. Yeah. Like I said, not every project is going to address all of these criteria. If you've got a bridge project, hey, it's a bridge project, right? So talk about that. This is just sort of the full universe of everything that we're looking at and the priorities that are important for the region, but we don't expect any individual project to score 48 points.
And then it looks like the regional and the sub-regional are concurrently, yet how will we know what RTD and DRCOG have on the regional plan? Will that be advanced to us before we have to finalize our list?
Yeah, short answer is yes, as much as possible. So we'll be working with the sort of three agencies. We'll be working with the forums. It's our job to ensure that those are kind of well coordinated and cross-pollinated across each other so that, for example, if a state highway is coming through kind of the interagency process, then, you know, say for Douglas County Forum, you don't have to use one of your submittals if we know that, for example, CDOT is going to submit on that state or federal highway. So we will try to ensure that coordination and that cross-pollination during the candidate solicitation process.
And then, but you did say on the 72 example, you would still want to hear from the other agencies if that was also a priority. So how would you differentiate that? In other words, we'd recognize it's on CDOT's list, but they'll put it in our top 10 or just make note of it? Or does that take one of our 10 votes out of Doug, 10 project choices?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. That's a good question. I think as those start coming forward, we'll work with you on them, but yes, I will lean to ultimately, we still do want to hear from you. Again, even if it's a state or federal highway.
Yeah, Michelle.
Hey, Jacob. So does the output of this impact or relate to the TIP policy at all? Is there like any crossover?
So not directly, not specifically. However, just to be clear, and I always hate defaulting to federal requirements. We would do this anyway, but it is a federal requirement, as you've heard us say before, that projects that are eligible to compete for funding in the Transportation Improvement Program must first be included in the fiscally constrained regional transportation plan. So that is the biggest link. So it's not so much about TIP policy on a particular project, particularly for those projects that, as I said, let me come back up to the top. Here, I said that there are projects that we identify the project funding categories that get identified later in the TIP process as TIP projects. It's not so much about that, but these specific projects, these top two, these are ones that we do need to individually identify in the plan, as I said, because we are a non-attainment area for air quality conformity. And these are the projects that need to be identified in the RTP to make them eligible to compete for funding in the TIP. That's the biggest link. Does that help?
So the air quality criterion includes greenhouse gas emissions, and Kent confirmed that these are regional funds and not federal funds, but I know you're also using federal performance measures, and at the federal level, you're not allowed to evaluate anything against greenhouse gas. And so I'm curious how all of that is lining up in terms of the interactions with the feds.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that clarifying question. So let's be clear about a couple things. Air quality does not include greenhouse gases. Air quality is a specific federal requirement for criteria pollutants for ozone that we, and we can go into this in a separate presentation, but the criteria pollutants for ozone that we are required to demonstrate that we meet the motor vehicle emissions budgets that are set in the state implementation plan for air quality. That is the federal requirement. That is analysis that we do at the plan level. Once we have a draft fiscally constrained plan, we model the plan for air quality conformity. Greenhouse gas work is completely separate. Greenhouse gas work is a state requirement under the Transportation Commission of the Transportation Greenhouse Gas Rule. It is a somewhat similar process in the sense that we model the plan also for compliance with the reduction levels that are required of us in the state greenhouse gas rule. So while there are some similarities in process, two different sets of requirements, two different sets of data, two different things that we do.
And the evaluation criterion that says improve air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that's all just staying with the regional projects and therefore is not an issue at the federal level?
Yeah, because let me get down to that.
A little more, I think. Yeah, that one.
Okay. Yeah, let me improve. Okay, yeah, so fair point. So yes, everything I said is correct. Well, then why did you combine it here in this one bullet? Simply because what we're looking for, this is mostly pretty qualitative. Again, this is not a tip application. You're not going to be pulling reams of data. It's not going to be 10 pages long. So for convenience, yes, we've grouped them together here as related concepts that we just qualitatively want you to talk about how your project will improve air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. But the technical work that we do, the federal and state requirements that we meet, that's what I'm speaking to in terms of how they're separate. Does that help?
Yeah, since we're spending a lot of time right now, and Jessica's nodding her head too, making sure that we don't trip up any of our projects with state requirements that have requirements that the federal requirements no longer allow you to talk about. I just wanted to ask the question.
So here we're just asking really qualitatively, just tell us how your project will help improve air quality and help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So meant to be qualitative, big picture, conceptual, 30-year plan. The requirements that we meet, the federal and state requirements we meet, are different and more specific.
All right, thank you. I think another question from Art Griffith.
Kathleen, I can't back on you. But, if you go to the points, the greenhouse gas would be air quality, right, as well as how our Metro Vision objectives. Because so work plan and everything focus on gas would show up in the points. Okay.
And again, I want to be really clear about this. Yes, at the federal level, as you were alluding to, not a point of emphasis right now. That doesn't mean we can't use it in our own planning process, particularly when we do have a state requirement for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Colorado. So for all of these, this is not a federal test. This is not, federal sort of data or quantitative analysis. This is just what's important to us in this region, which includes things that we've articulated as important through this plan, which we've articulated as important in this region through Metro Vision plan, and which the feds have told us that we need to use through national performance measures. So it doesn't preclude our ability to talk about at the very qualitative 2050 plan level, conceptual level of greenhouse gas. We can do that. It's more about, again, how we meet federal and state requirements on the back end. That's where there's the separation and the difference. Does that make sense to folks? Because I want to make sure that's clear.
All right, thank you very much. I think we have another question. Rocky?
Probably more procedural, but for all the carryover projects, are you guys going to publish that before you go to call for projects?
Yep, thank you, Rocky. And in fact, I should have said in this packet, one of the attachments for this item is a draft list from us based on work that we've done going through the Transportation Improvement Program, beginning of outreach to all of you. We've put together our sense of these projects and their status and whether they would be carried over or not. So we do invite you to look at that list to give us any feedback. If we got something incorrect, we'll certainly correct it. But yes, that draft project list is in the packet.
Those projects are already carried over. Are they going to count against the regionals?
No. If they're carried over, they're carried over. Do not relate to anything else I've talked about here today.
And two more follows, Jessica, and then one last one, Art.
Thank you, Jacob. This is riveting. Okay, so on the table, I was looking at the, this is Jessica with CDOT, on the table you provided in here, which is very tiny. I don't think it makes accessibility guidelines, but I could barely read it, but I got it. I think we need to make a decision. A couple of these, if we're going to say in NEPA, are we going to include documents that are in a reevaluation status as in NEPA? And I would probably recommend that we do, but just maybe a consistency for all of these. I see a couple that are in reevaluation status, which is NEPA, but they're listed as eligible to resubmit, and some of them are listed as automatically carry forward. So maybe just something to chat about.
Okay, let's talk offline about that.
Art and then Mac.
Art Griffith with Douglas County. I'm sorry about that, but the question, I think, like some of the projects carried forward, they're not going to count, so they don't count against the 10 for like Douglas County.
Correct.
Okay.
Good clarification. Mac.
Thank you, Matt Callison, City of Aurora, Arapahoe County. Jacob, a little bit further looking ahead, will you have an estimate on resource allocation, what we're looking at in terms of generalized funding ranges on the RTP?
Yeah.
Sort of help us look at what the competition is. And
yeah, short answer is yes. There's a lot of things progressing in parallel, and that is one of the big pieces. Just a little bit of context for some of the newer folks. Under federal law, and again, I hate to say that under federal law, but it's true. But whether federal law or not, the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan brings together all of the project, all of the investments, all of the funding sources, all of the revenues, all of the expenditures in this region, what it takes to operate, to maintain, to improve, state of good repair, to invest, to expand our regional transportation system. So the color of money doesn't matter. So whether it's local funding, whether it's CDOT dollars that they control, whether it's DRCOG dollars that we allocate through the TIP, toll highway authorities, like whatever it is, all of those funding sources, all of those projects come together to create the fiscally constrained plan. So Mac, to your question, one of the things that we're doing is working on sort of the financial plan piece of the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan to understand what are all those revenues, what do we think they are by 2050, as well as by staging period, because we stage the plan by financial increments. And then we'll start lining that up later in the year with project and program investments to start building the financial plan and building the fiscally constrained plan. And that actually alludes to, as I said earlier, that's part of the job of the interagency process. And that's why I say when it's not just a list of fiscally constrained projects through this process, as important as that is, it's all of those other considerations and all those other elements that come together to create ultimately the 2050 fiscally constrained plan. So short answer is yes, we're starting work on the financial plan that will proceed in parallel with the project side of the work.
All right. Thank you, Jacob, very much for all that presentation and fielding all those questions. I think Alvin may owe you a favor after.
We're a team.
No, thank you very much. We'll move on. We do not have any informational items today, so we will move on to administrative items. And today it looks like we just have, are there any additional member comments or other matters that were not brought up today on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none. Jacob did, he's double, there you go. We'll pause for another second, Jacob.
Catch my breath. All right. No, just wanted to announce that we will send this out when it comes out. The active transportation plan, we will release our draft. Let me try that again. We will release our draft active transportation plan later this week for public comment review period through the end of this month. And once we release it, we will send that link out to TAC, but wanted to give you a heads up that it's coming and invite folks to review that plan and comment while it's open for public comment period. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob, for that exciting update, and look forward to seeing that. So with that, our next TAC meeting will be Monday, August 25th, 2025. And with that, we are now adjourned at what looks like 2:04. Thank you very much, everybody. I was like, is it right?